Okay, let's get our discussion started. I'm going to briefly reintroduce everyone. From my left, going this way, the producer, Hrafnhildur Gunnarsdóttir, and then the director, Pamela Hogan, and next to Pamela, the associate producer, Grima Irmudottir, and Ambassador Svanhildur, Hólm Valsdóttir. So that's our panel. Let me start off with a question for Pamela. What made you want to make this film?
Well, I was raised by a single mom who discovered when I was in grade school that she was making 50 cents on what the men were making, on the dollar the men were making, and she became an instant feminist. So, she led the fight for the Equal Rights Amendment in my hometown in Boston. We never did pass it, but we got close. So I had that dancing in my brain, being in the front row seat to our own feminist movement in the 1970s. And then when I went to Iceland in 2015 with my family, and everybody was out photographing one day, and I was just thumbing through the Lonely Planet guide, and I saw this little paragraph in the back of the guide saying that this incredible thing had happened 90% of the country, and that it had started a revolution that made the country #1 for gender equality today. And honestly, my head exploded. And I just thought, how could I not know this story? And that's what we're hearing now as we show this film in festivals all over the world. That's the first thing that audiences say. How come I don't know this story? So when I discovered that a film hadn't yet been made, I don't know, I kind of didn't have a choice. It just kept chasing me around. And a friend of mine finally said to me, why don't you shut up and write a proposal, and I'll bring it to my company, and we'll give you some money. And that's how it all got started.
And how did you come to partner with Hrafnhildur on this?
Well, originally, I hired an American researcher, and we found some people, and we came with an American crew to do our first interviews. Literally everybody I talked to in Iceland that week said, you have to meet Hrafna, you have to meet Hrafna. And so we met for lunch, and something just clicked. Looking back on it now, I think maybe we sensed a kindred spirit. We both, there's a phrase I love, to make a better world, tell a better story. And I kind of feel like maybe that's been something we both, that's motivated both of us. So, as soon as we met, really the project transformed. We started working with an all Icelandic crew. Hrafna just knew so many things about the history, had been in the square herself that day. And then our, the partnership just deepened over the years. I can't imagine having made this film without Hrafna or Grima.
How would you characterize the partnership?
Well, it was strange because first she called me up and said, well, I'd like to make a film about the Women's Day Off, the women's strike. And I said, hasn't that been done? And then I was going through my head, there's this film and it's just a short. No, it hasn't been done. So it had been in front of me for a long time. I mean, I had done short pieces for television, but not a feature documentary. And so we met, and I felt immediately I could work with Pamela, and it's been a beautiful working relationship. Those are very rare to come by. She listens when I feel like she's going off, and and when she likes to worry, I let her worry.
My job.
And then people, were asking me, well, but isn't it strange to have it done by an English-speaking person? And I thought it would be an asset. And as a matter of fact, it was an asset because the women were facing somebody who was of another culture, and thus they explained things much better than they would have explained it to me. And just they were really excellent in their English language. They spoke very good English, really. And I did a few interviews in Icelandic, so we have that also with it. But and Pamela is an extremely skilled interviewer. I learned a lot from her.
Thank you, Hrafna.
I'll open this question to anyone who would like to respond. The Red Stocking movement had existed for more than a decade in Iceland before Women's Day Off. Why do you think Women's Day Off was such a galvanizing event? Anyone can jump in.
Well,
No, good, please.
well, I think, well, since we just watched this documentary, you sort of saw how the momentum grew. And there had been a lot of things that the Red Stocking movement had been doing up until 1975. But then there was this, the UN Women's Year, and as they themselves said, there was just this pressure that had been building, and they needed to find a way to sort of express or sort of, get a release for that pressure. So I think that probably there was a lot of things happening, but all in all, it was about just those great characters, those great women. For me as an Icelander to watch this, documentary, it's so great because I know all of those faces. I have met so many of those women. Some of them I haven't, like the heroes out at sea. It was just like, it's so moving. It's something that I grew up with. This is something that has been a part of, sort of the Icelandic history for such a long time, but it's just so great to see this put together in such a great way as you have done. And I just want to say, because this hasn't been done before, which is a little bit strange though, so I'm just so grateful for you, grateful for your work, for having actually documented this history and so well before we lost some of those, big characters that we just saw on the screen. We have so many women there that, did great things. They did great thing, in October 1975. But they did great things. There was Vigdís Finnbogadóttir who became president. And we had the chief of the Supreme Court and Chief Justice. But there was another judge there, and there was a minister also, and women that have been influencing the Icelandic society for more than 50 years. So I'm grateful to you, and I'm grateful to those those trailblazers that came before us and paved the way for my generation and generations to come.
It's actually interesting because in 1975, the Red Stocking and the women's movement in Iceland felt like they had fallen behind what was happening in America and Europe. And so they were like inspired, we have to do something that will put us in the forefront. And so when they heard about the Women's Year, they took it all the way and organized this strike, which in fact I think is the most important social revolution that happened in Iceland in the 20th century. And they really exceeded everything, exceeded the Europeans and exceeded the Americans.
Hraba, you were in the square in 1975 with your mother that day.
Yes.
What do you remember about it?
I just remember my mother was a very proper lady who worked with the finance ministry, and she decided to go because she knew Guðrún Erlendsdóttir. They had grown up on the same street, and she felt it was important because she was not happy about the unequal pay. And it was totally amazing because such a big crowd I had never seen in my lifetime. But most of all, I remember waking up the next morning and thinking, well, now everything's fixed. So that took a little longer.
And you were how old at the time?
I was 11.
11, okay. So you thought everything was fixed. During the rally, though, what were some of the thoughts that went through your mind? Had you ever seen your mom I guess you hadn't, in a situation like this?
No, I had not.
Right.
She was a very proper woman and not like me. But I guess I had a bit of a comparison because I had been selling papers on the street when I was 11. I know it's a little strange for you that 11-year-old was working already. But selling papers on the street, I was faced with having to fight with the boys to get the papers. And sometimes they would think I was a boy because I had very short hair. And when I was a boy, I was always at the front of the line with the boys and getting the papers immediately. So I understood there was a little bit of inequality. So I could really feel the square. I could feel, because like somebody says in the film, there were these waves. You could sense that things were changing. And I could feel it. And I think it has given me shoulders to stand up in my whole career as a filmmaker. You know, here I am still making films.
Pamela, your mother was also an activist. You once accompanied her to the Massachusetts State House to lobby for passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. As a child, what did you think of her activism?
I'm not proud to say this. I was a young teenager, and I found it a little embarrassing. I mean, I would come home from high school, and there would be really angry women having a consciousness-raising session in our living room. And, you know, no boy would come within a mile of my house. And I didn't appreciate well enough. You know, by the time I got to college, and this was just a few years later, that women's movement had broken so much ground that basically me and all my girlfriends who knew that, oh, we could be lawyers, we could be doctors. That hadn't been true 10 years before, and we didn't fully appreciate it. It's only now, and I have to tell you, partway through making this film, one of the women, one of the Red Stockings, put her arm around me and said, you know you're making this film for your mother, right? And I was like, oh, good point. So I think that when I heard this story, I just thought, what would my mother think? Because our movement got to a certain place and stopped. And the difference with Iceland's movement is it never stopped. They just kept going. Every decade, it would be a different group of women with different ideals, but they never stopped. And I just think that's incredible.
If I could take a moment to tell my own story, if memory serves. When I was growing up, around this time in 1975, my mother had a button that said, I'm going to vote for President Ford's wife. And Betty Ford was instrumental in advocating for the Equal Rights Amendment, and President Ford, again, if I'm getting my history correct, actually came out in favor of it. What were some of the similarities and differences between what was going on in the U.S. and what was going on in Iceland at exactly the same time?
I mean, I'm not a gender scholar, but I do think, and if I were doing a PhD thesis now, I would study this, that the humor that the Red Stockings used in their movement was unique. Certainly was different than kind of what the toolkit was here in the United States. And I think it made an enormous difference. It both kept the women's spirits up, but they knew, and they told us this, they used it to open people's ears to their message. And there's something about the fist, and of course, they were, you know, just as determined to change their society as American women were, but I just think it was really strategic, the way that they used humor.
Well, what's an example of that? Does something jump out in terms of the use of humor?
The use of humor? Yeah. Well, entering the cow in the beauty contest.
Oh, well, okay, yes.
You know, crucifying the housewife on a Christmas tree. Hrapa says that years later,
Yeah, in the 80s, they would do actions like they would go to the store and buy flour and milk and go up to the counter, and when they were supposed to pay, they said, well, we're only going to pay 63% because that's how much we are paid less than men. So it would be, the whole store would be in an upheaval and, you know, a lot of commotion. So they did a lot of funny things.
Can I put on my journalist hat?
Sure.
Because Irma here, she's from another generation than we are. So, because you said, Pamela, that, you know, the Icelandic movement, it just kept going on and you know, evolved. So Irma, I just wanted to ask you, because obviously another younger generation, you know, what did the Women's Day Off or the Women's Strike mean for you, and how has the women's movement changed in your eyes, and how has it affected you? You know?
Yeah, I would say that also just working on this project affected me in a lot of different ways, in a lot of deep, meaningful ways, because like it's like growing up in Iceland, it's like gender equality, it's such a big it's like a part of our national identity and who we are. And growing up, I was like, that was just what I knew, the opportunities I had, and then working on this project and meeting these women firsthand and really seeing firsthand everything they went through, how brave they were and everything they had to do to where we are today, and how so much of the opportunities I've had in my life are thanks to their effort. So it was very monumental as an experience to work and meet these women and sit down with them and hear their stories. Also because it made me realize, which I think is also very current to today, like how easy it is to sort of take for granted everything that came before, and and I think that's why this message is also especially important today, because we can't take for granted all the work and this effort that has given us where we are today. So, and that is definitely endangered. So yeah, it's definitely very meaningful, and I'm very thankful to them, for sure. Yeah.
Even though the U.S. and Iceland had these women's movements at the same time, the two countries seem to be in different places right now. The U.S. ranks 43rd, thereabouts, for gender parity. Why do you think the U.S. has not achieved the same level of equality? And Iceland elected a woman leader in 1980, and the U.S. has failed twice as recently as a year ago to elect a woman leader. Why the difference?
I do think that maybe we've missed a step in not focusing as Iceland did, and it's not too late, on getting more women elected to positions from the local to the national. Because that really turned a corner for Iceland when that started happening in the 1980s. It almost started something going that couldn't be stopped. And we really have never focused on that in this country. That's one of the takeaways that I have.
Up until 1983, there had never been more women in parliament than 3 at a time. So then, where the women came together, some of them who we saw in the documentary, and formed the Women's Coalition. And that resulted in more women getting elected in 1983, not only from the Women's Coalition, but also from other more traditional parties. So they were instigating change themselves, and also pressuring others to do better. Mm-hmm. And so we have never, again, seen a parliament with only 3 women in Iceland, fortunately. Mm-hmm. And now, as you see, it's about half now. There are 11 ministers in the cabinet in Iceland at the moment in the coalition. 6 of them are women. There are 3 parties that created that coalition. All of them are led by women. There are 6 parties in the Icelandic parliament now, 4 of them led by women. Wow. So it's a movement they started 50 years or more ago. It's still going.
Yeah. Looking at the first woman to make the breakthrough, what was it about? I'm sorry, Vigdis?
Vigdis, yes.
Yeah. What was it about Vigdis that helped her break through that glass ceiling?
She was known for teaching French on television, so she was a face that people knew. That was one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she won by a very small margin. We can't forget that. But she was a known face, and she was unique in that way because she wouldn't identify left or right. She would say, well, if you judge me by this, I'm to the right. If you judge me by that, I'm to the left. So she could be voted for by many. But I think also it was due to, I think the 1975 strike did inspire, maybe not her, because I think she was really pushed to run. It wasn't in her mind to run. According to her autobiography and whatever interviews we've taken with her. She was really not thinking about it, but she was being pushed by people to do it. And what a fantastic run that was. Probably many people know here the stories, because she was a single woman, divorced, with an adopted child. She had had breast cancer and her breast removed, which became like a topic while she was running. Somebody asked her, well, how are you gonna run a nation if you only have one breast? And she was very quick. She was quick with it, and she said, well, I wasn't imagining to have the nation on my breastfeeding. And the other things, like some guy said to her, I am glad you're not married, because, then they would say, oh, if you were answering questions, they would say, oh, her husband told her to say that. So there were all those, but yeah, it was a fantastic time to witness, because I remember it very well.
Madam Ambassador, at the beginning of the evening, you said you wouldn't give advice unless you're asked for advice. Well, I'm asking for advice on behalf of the U.S. Beyond getting women more involved at the entry level of politics, what are other things that the U.S. could do to achieve more gender equality, especially looking at young women, girls, 11-year-olds of today, who are going to be moving into those political positions in 15, 20 years?
Well, I'm not going to tell the U.S. what to do.
Okay. Well,
But what we have done, and I think that it's universally accepted as a fundamental thing for gender equality in Iceland, is that it's not enough to tell people that they can seek every opportunity that they like. You have to have the social infrastructure to support that as well. Yeah. So just a simple thing, well, maybe it's not simple to everyone, but to us it's kind of simple, is the thing of having universal childcare, heavily subsidized universal childcare. That's really important, so that we have one of the highest women labor force participation in the world. Women are an economic force, but I think that having that universal childcare has played a big role in that. And just think about it. If you have a young child in Iceland, you have to pay probably around $250 a month for 5 days a week, 8 days, including meals. Also, after hours, after school, when the kids are young, you have to have support there as well. That's something that's very accessible in Iceland. So you probably pay less than $200 for 5 days a week for after hours at school. So it's often people think about like physical infrastructure as something that's really important for a society. If you want to be a powerful economic society, you need to have a lot of roads and tunnels and electricity and all that. But if you can't actually leave your home to go to work, to use that road or that tunnel, or use sort of the ingenuity that you have, that isn't worth that much. So it's like, I think, I don't know if it's the right word for it, but utilize women's power in every way possible.
And your parental leave is also extraordinary. We don't, in this country, have even 1 day of guaranteed maternity leave. It's up to your company. And you've got a year split between the man and the woman. And that's extraordinary. That's also very supportive of women working.
Yeah, it's a use it or lose it system. So it's split like 6 months between the parents, so 12 months as a whole. You can transfer 6 weeks from one parent to the other, but that's it. So if you don't use your leave, then you lose it. Yeah. And that means that about 90% of fathers in Iceland use that leave. I have a few grandkids. My son, he just had his second child, and the mother is staying at home right now, but in March she's going, back to work, and he's going to be staying home with their daughter until September.
That's amazing.
And that's just a normal thing.
Yeah.
Let me get to some audience questions. Thank you for these. You're making my life easier, and these are good, by the way. We'll sort of progress from the moment of the event onward. From the moment of the event, what was the immediate aftermath like, the immediate aftermath of the day off? Were there husbands or bosses who were angry or supportive? And did you learn about how women who did not participate felt about it?
I think people kind of, once the day had passed, I think it kind of, they forgot about it a little bit. That's sort of my sense. Angry people, well, some it doesn't show up in the film, but the woman who ended up going who was typesetting, because she went after midnight to typeset, she told me just last week that she felt like a traitor. I met another one of the typesetters actually yesterday at a screening in Iceland, and she said she felt the same way. A woman who didn't go to the strike, who was looking at it out through the window, they felt like they had betrayed the cause, I guess. But I mean, in 2023, there was a big strike. There was 100-some thousand people on the square then, and I heard things like some men. I didn't see enough men, I think, at that strike. But some of them said, "Oh, it's so good that they are all at the square because then it's easy to drive all day." So I don't know. What did you hear, Pamela?
Well, there were a lot of divorces during the women's movement in the 70s. They did tell us that. I don't know if it was the day after the strike, but of course you're shaking up the whole paradigm, the whole power balance. People said, what they said was, a lot of the women said to me that until they saw everyone on the square, because they didn't know that could happen, that would happen, they hoped it would, and that it was almost like a proof of concept. We actually can do something big, because they did it. So that was great. But then, as Hrafna was saying, they were also like, well, where are the changes? The changes aren't happening right away. So did it even matter? And as a matter of fact, RÚV, the public television station, who had crews filming all day long, in the subsequent years, erased all but 15 minutes of the footage, because they just didn't know how transformative it would turn out to have been. So it was that mixture, kind of that mixture.
Right. And the reaction from men, was it mostly negative or?
No, I think it wasn't negative. I think there were mixed opinions, certainly. Okay. I remember my father, but and he thought it was great. I can't remember anybody else being angry, but then again, I was very young, so.
I would imagine that the men more fully appreciated how hard it is to cook a meal afterwards.
Especially hot dogs.
Exactly. Another question from the audience: how did Iceland institutionalize equal rights for women after the day off, and has there been any backlash recently?
Institutionalized, we had the equality law in shortly after 75, which has been amended quite a few times since then. There was a board, equal rights board, founded. There were many, there were sort of many different ways that it was implemented. There was affirmative action that was legalized. I think that this wasn't a walk in the park, you know, after 1975. Not everything changed the day after,
No.
and not 5 years after, and not 10 years after, but things started changing. And when Vigdís ran, it was an uphill battle.
Yeah.
She was there, the only woman with, you know, all the men that were running, and I think not many people saw her as the front runner. Of course, as Hrafnhildur said, it was there were several things that were different about Vigdís. Not only that she was a woman, but that she didn't have a spouse, and she had a adopted daughter, and you know, it's so it was. She was sort of, you know, breaking a lot of norms, and the marching, because you don't have to have a majority to win a presidential election in Iceland. I think she got about 35% when she got elected in 1980. She was opposed in 1988, and then she got about 95%. So, you know, in only 8 years, she certainly gained ground, and she made Icelanders proud. And I think, you know, there is one thing about institutionalizing, you know, change, but there's also the thing about having such strong role models as Vigdís was and still is.
Yeah, it's there is a funny addition to that story. When she decided not to run in 1996, and they had a lot of men running for president then, and there was this kid or this boy that said to his mother, I didn't know men could be presidents. So it took 16 years to change that thought, so there you have it. You just need a woman president here.
Well, we'll see what the future holds. This question from a guest from the Embassy of Belgium. The world has changed a lot since 1975, and not only in positive ways. I believe the visitor meant to put a nod in there, not only in positive ways. What are new challenges for women in Iceland today?
I think Irma would be good, you know, for that question.
Studying in America, so.
Yeah, but she's the youngest.
Well, there is the backlash. There is a little bit of a backlash, but, you know, oddly enough, we had the, you know, during the last election, you know, I could sense that there was going to be a little bit of a swing towards this populist party, which happened, but we had a very powerful swing also into the center. So we dodged, you know, a populist party kind of led government. But that could still come up. There is in Iceland, you know, the same rumble as is in the rest of the world, unfortunately, but it's a lot less, I think. But I don't know what you think.
Yeah, and I think also it's a backlash that happens sort of in the aftermath of like movements like the Me Too movement and movements where that were really big for high schoolers and just where Icelanders, women, young women, really came together and were advocating for change. I think there was a movement like Stand Together against like sexual violence, and those movements were very big and really changed a lot of things in the aftermath as well. But I think then there's the natural kind of like you change something and then there's also resistance to that change, not only of course in Iceland, but just to what's happening around the world. And I think, yeah, we definitely are seeing some waves of backlash right now, but I think that's just more recent to kind of, yeah.
I think that just as Hrafnhildur was, I think, sorry, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but sort of it's more on the fringes somehow. It's not a big or something that you feel is like some kind of a powerful undercurrent. It's kind of more in the fringes, and everyone has some kind of a populist party or populist people, sort of, I don't know, views, but I think we are fortunate to have sort of at least we have managed to dodge that bullet in elections, for instance, for the past couple of elections.
Yeah.
I have one more audience question, and I encourage everyone to fill these out and pass them along to Cecily. A question from Arctic Today. What are some of the ways men have benefited from the progress of women in Iceland?
I think they have, for sure, I think they're better connected to their children. And I think that's something that I've seen, that, men taking care of their children and just being more connected. That's one thing I can think about. And, they don't take it, they're not upset by women who want to work, or, I think everybody, like somebody's, at the end of the film, everybody is equal, and I think that's a mentality at home.
There is comfort in sharing responsibilities. Mm-hmm. So whether it's in your home or at the workplace or in politics, and you need to make a strong society. For instance, if you're going to create a committee of some sorts, you don't put just one type in that committee. You need all kinds of people with different backgrounds and different voices and different experience, and I think that's what we have gotten out of the sort of the women's movement in Iceland, and also the women's movement has been a great support to the LGBTQI movement in Iceland as well. So I think that those movements have found strength in its others' existence. So I think the women's movement in Iceland has been a role model to all kinds of other movements.
I would just wanted to mention that we filmed like a gender sensitivity class, an education class in the high school in Iceland, which was pioneered by this amazing teacher and is now being used in a lot of schools around Iceland, although it's not mandatory. And it was, I raised 2 sons. It was fascinating to me to see these, athletic, 17-year-old guys talking in a very vulnerable way, saying, well, really, we're kind of talking about how, when I lose a soccer game, it's okay to cry. Really learning in a very meaningful way, and talking with boys and girls together about stereotypes and how each can be more sensitive to the other. Do you remember that class?
Yes.
I'd never seen anything like that. We don't have anything like that here. And I just thought those young men I think it's a great thing for them to have through the rest of their lives, what they learned in that class.
Looking at another moment here in the current situation, so to speak, in 2023, Iceland's women, including the Prime Minister, Katrín Jakobsdóttir, went on strike again to protest the persistent wage gap and growing violence against women. What impact did that have?
Well, I think that's one of the areas Iceland could improve, and as a matter of fact, when the film was premiering last year on the 24th of October 2024, the organizing committee for 2025 brought all the political leaders into the cinema and read them the riot act of what needed to be worked upon, and on the forefront of that list was violence against women. And I think it's it's a slow progress. I don't know how you feel about that, Svanhildur.
Well,
it's difficult.
At least I think there have been some measures taken to address that, and we have been fortunate to have great leadership. For instance, in the National Commission the Commissioner of the National Police, and also in other commissioners of police in Iceland. More in district commissioners. We have a few women there as well, and I think that even though we say that we have taken great strides when it comes to gender equality, which we have. There are also some viewpoints that you sometimes need women to address the problem or approach the problem in a different way than maybe men would have done. But I think that, I think that you make a strong point there with violence against women, but that's a universal problem in the world, unfortunately.
This point was brought up in the film. Iceland, of course, is a small country, and one of the people interviewed in the film said you tend to know a lot of other folks or even are related to them. How is that an advantage and how is that a disadvantage in moving toward gender equality? The fact that it's such a small sample size.
Well, that's a hard question. Well, I think it has worked to our advantage. I don't know how to answer that question.
So, someone, in terms of being able to network and knowing each other, someone in the film said that's very Iceland.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that. Why is that
Sure.
very Iceland?
Well, I guess, we are, about 370,000, so we may sound big, but we are a small nation. And we are all half related to each other, I'm sure I'm, fourth or fifth cousin of Svanhildur, and we hired this young woman, and I didn't know that she was my third cousin. So
Nepotism.
yeah, totally. So it was a happy surprise, but there is a strong network, and women talk, they meet and they are in these, like she said, a sewing club where they don't sew. Actually, they have the excuse that they're going to sew, but then they're just talking all night. So, yeah.
I agree with Hrafnhildur on that. I think it's worked to our advantage. It's not a disadvantage. One of the things is that we are quite agile when we have to do something. Lines of communications are usually short. You usually know someone somewhere who can do something about things. So it's the distance between people is just, because we're only a little less than 400,000, it's just shorter. So, I think that's a plus. It's a cohesive society. So, yeah, and because you mentioned the Me Too movement, I was in quite a lot of Facebook groups when that started, because I had been, working in politics, and then I had also been, working in media, and there were different groups, and you just saw how quickly, women connected, bonded, and moved. Mm-hmm. So I think, those few degrees of separation, it's a strength.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is also the national character of, we are not very organized, but we can make things happen like out of the drop of a hat, because we are very flexible, and that might have to do with the weather,
Yeah, you can't actually plan, well, yeah. Maybe if it's indoors, but you don't plan an outdoor event and expect everything to go as planned. You always have to have a plan B, yeah. Or C, yeah. Or D.
There's a trend in the U.S., I suppose you could call it a subset or a part of the MAGA movement, Make America Great Again, President Trump's supporters. There's a part of that is stressing that women embrace traditional roles. I believe the term is trad wife, and the idea is that these young women in the mid-20s actually do have the goal of getting married, having children, being a stay-at-home mom, and they're defending that life trajectory. How do you, is there any similar movement in Iceland, and what do you think of that approach?
Well, I have heard about that in Iceland, you know, also, but I think people should be allowed to do what they want, period. You know, if they want to stay at home, they should be able to stay at home. But if they want to go out and work and be active in society, I think that's what we have fought for. Everybody doesn't fit in this one mold, and that's what I would object to, you know, being pushed at us. And like we were having a conversation about these thread wives, and a lot of them apparently have social media, so they already have a job anyhow.
Being influencers.
Yeah, so being influencers, so I don't know, but I'm not a specialist in this. Pamela, you have
No,
a
I'm
big
not a-
opinion. These are not your
I
friends?
can't go there. I can't go there.
Okay, you can't go there, okay, I see.
I think we need
Very
to reissue the feminine mystique.
Yeah.
I'm sure it gets read widely.
Yes, well, let's look at the film and how it was put together. How long did it take you to make the film, and what were some of the challenges you encountered along the way?
Like 100 years, kind of. I mean, we were in production for 7 years, post-production for 1 or 2, and now the rollout, we're 2 years into our rollout. It took a really long time, partly because of the difficulty raising money. It's not, especially at the beginning when we didn't have animation as part of it, I think that, you know, there maybe was a concern, it would be kind of like educational, you know, eat your vegetables. But also there was just a sense that I kept getting from funders that it's a story about a collective, and that's not as commercial. You know, it should be about 1 or 2 really, you know, like kind of like here in the States, we had Betty Friedan, we had Jane Fonda, we had Gloria Steinem. You couldn't make a film about this Icelandic movement that way because, as they said, we're all equal. There's no leaders. But that made it maybe a little less appealing to funders. It worked out to be totally to our advantage because it took 7 years to find the stories. Most of these stories, you know, were not in the record in any way, even in Icelandic, never mind in the English language. So working with Hrapa and fantastic researchers and Grima, one person would hear about another story. You know, I must have had 1,000 cups of coffee with people in Reykjavik that somebody had heard they might have something to say or they might know somebody. So it worked out beautifully. And then by the time it was finished, not only did we have that pastiche of stories showing not only what the activists were doing, but what the ordinary men and women were doing and how they were starting to be affected by the movement. Not only that, but coming out just as the 50th anniversary comes around. So it's kind of like perfect timing. So I'm not complaining.
Tell us a little more about the decision to use animation in the documentary. Why did you do that, and what has the reaction been? Have you shown this to focus groups and so on, and what's their reaction?
So I mean, it would have been about 20 minutes long without animation. There just wasn't a lot of visual documentation. Grima was, I mean, thanks to Hrapa, we formed a fantastic partnership with Icelandic public television. And they were giving us all this footage in kind. So Grima spent weeks and months of her life finding, you know, fabulous things, but they still were only amounting to, you know, a little bit of what we needed to show visually to bring that time to life. So it really became, you know, that we needed animation. And we were just very lucky to find Joel because he immediately got the humor, the playfulness, and he's also a bit of a historian himself and would really study, you know, the archival material to try and be sure that he got things right. And then Hrapa and her team would, you know, also be, you know, sort of say, well, that's not what radios look like then, or she wouldn't have worn that dress in 5th grade, or, you know, whatever it might be. So that, and my fear when we then showed it, it never occurred to me until the day we showed it to the women in the film. Oh no, what if they think we're making fun of them? But actually what happened was, you know, they gave us a standing ovation and they bouquets of flowers. And then I was kind of standing there, couldn't wait till they all came up to talk to me. No. They went to talk to Joel, the animator. They all wanted to thank him and how much they enjoyed kind of, becoming these, the way that he captured their youthful selves, their hopes, their dreams. So it worked out. We worked out.
How big a challenge was the 50-year timeline? Because women who, I mean, if you were at that rally in 1975, even if you were a young professional, a young mother, you're at least 70 right now.
Icelandic women age really well.
And many of the women who we saw at the rally have passed on. How challenging was that 50-year timeline to find sources?
I mean, we felt it was a race against time. And you'd hear of someone, and I'd call them, and maybe a niece would answer the phone and say, well, she's not doing, she's having some struggles right now. Try again next year. I'd call, and the phone wouldn't, exist anymore. So we really were just running against time, and just got very lucky that that they are able to. So many of the women were able to tell the stories in their own words.
Right. We're nearing the end of our time, but are there other things? As I've begun to ask people I interview at work, is there anything you'd like to add? Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have asked? Please go ahead and address questions that I didn't bring up.
I think you've actually done a wonderful job.
Oh,
Yeah, you have.
thank you. But if there's something you want to add, feel free.
I can add one thing, but it doesn't do with anything. But it's we always miss something from the films that we make. We think, oh, why didn't we put that in? But there is one short story I'd like to end with, and that's the story about the women on the boat. Because and this didn't go into the film. The next day, after they were on the strike, the captain calls them up to his cabin, and they're all like shaking in their boots, and they go up to his cabin, and he serves them champagne. And they were like, "What happened?" And apparently, his wife had been on the square, and when they read the telegram on the square, she was so impressed, and so she called them on the ship radio that evening and said, "Listen, you have heroes on your ship, and you should be very good to them." So it was a happy ending.
Before I ask the final question, let me take a moment to thank the National Press Club Headliners Team Chair Jen Judson, and club member and former club president Donna Leinwan-Leger, as well as club executive director Didier Sauji, and the entire club staff for making this event possible. Thank you also to our great friends at the Embassy of Iceland for bringing this documentary and its creators to us, and for quenching our thirst with this terrific Icelandic water. I believe I like it better than Fiji. And so I'll have to, although I don't believe I've seen it at Safeway or Whole Foods for that matter. And we're grateful for your partnership. And thank you to our audience for being here today, for taking time midweek and an evening to join us today. And for our panelists, let me get to the most important thing, and that is to present each of you with a National Press Club mug as a small token of our thanks for this evening. And these are, of course, invaluable, but they also would not exceed any gift limitation that the Icelandic government might have imposed on you, Ms. Ambassador. So let me give you a mug.
Thank you.
A ceremony. Thank you. Oh. Wow. Thank you.
And then I do have the final question. I was thinking through this as I was watching the film tonight. Actually, it was the second time I've watched it, but October 24th, that was a Friday in 1975. That's a Friday in 2025.
Yeah.
So in 2 weeks, it will be precisely the 50th anniversary, not just by the calendar, but by the day of the week too. Actually, I have a two-part question. Was that planned in terms of releasing the film? And what is planned in Iceland this Friday, October 24th, in terms of commemoration?
Well, I've had journalists and people contact me all year about the plan, and I've been asking everybody, and they're like, we don't know what the weather is going to be like. We can't plan this far ahead. So this morning, something came up on Facebook about what they're going to do. So there's going to be a march, a historic march from Sóleyjargata. It's not a long walk. So there's going to be a march from there to Arnarhóll, which is right near the square that it was held. And there will be something happening on the stage there. But 2 p.m., there seems to be, it's not called for a strike, but I predict that there's going to be a lot of women on the street, and maybe men, hopefully.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you to each of our guests. Thank you to our audience. And we're adjourned.